The year was 1872. When the ship Mary Celeste departed from New York Harbor, no one thought this voyage would leave such a mark in history. Captain Benjamin Briggs was an experienced sailor. With him were his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia. The 7-member crew was complete. Destination, Genoa. Cargo, 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. A normal trade route, a normal November morning. Another ship, the Dei Gratia, spotted the Mary Celeste on December 4th, 1872, off the Azores. The ship was drifting strangely. Directional control was lost. The sails were torn, but usable. Captain David Morehouse of the Dei Gratia approached the vessel. There was no response to their calls. 3 crew members from the Dei Gratia boarded a small boat and crossed to the Mary Celeste. No one was on deck. Inside, everything was in its place. The dining table was set. Food was fresh, the water supply was full. Navigation instruments stood in the captain's cabin. Personal belongings, clothes, toys, were all where they should be. The cargo was completely intact. The only thing missing was the lifeboat. The sextant and navigation log were also gone. The ship's water pump was open. The hold was partially flooded, but the ship wasn't sinking. This amount of water wasn't a threat to a normal cargo vessel. The captain's last entry was dated November 25th. It showed they were off Santa Maria Island. 9 days had passed from that day to December 4th. What happened in those 9 days, no one knows. Why did no one remain at the helm? Why was the lifeboat lowered in haste? Where did they go? These questions have no answers. The Dei Gratia crew towed the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar. There, a maritime court launched an investigation. Conspiracy theories emerged. Claims of crew mutiny were examined. The possibility of alcohol barrel explosions was discussed. Suspicions of insurance fraud were investigated. No theory found conclusive evidence. The court ruled that the ship had been abandoned. The reason remained unclear. Over the years, countless explanations came forward. Waterspouts, underwater earthquakes, pirates, toxic fumes, ergot poisoning, disturbed sea waters, all were theorized. None were satisfactory. Mary Celeste remained at sea for 13 more years. In 1885, she was deliberately run into a reef off Haiti. It was intended as insurance fraud. But the ship was already famous. It wasn't her loss that made her legendary, but how she was found. Today, the Mary Celeste case is still debated. The crew's bodies were never found. Sarah Briggs, Benjamin Briggs, little Sophia, and 7 crew members are somewhere in the depths of the Atlantic. The question of why they left the ship remains unanswered. Perhaps a moment of panic, perhaps a wrong decision, perhaps a threat we'll never know. The ship was empty. The sea was silent, and no one saw what happened. The year was 1918. The USS Cyclops was one of the U.S. Navy's largest fuel supply ships. World War I was ongoing. The ship departed from Brazil. Destination, Baltimore. Cargo, 10,400 tons of manganese ore. 309 people were aboard. 261 crew, 48 passengers. Captain George Worley was an experienced sailor. The ship was old but seaworthy. A normal trade route, a normal March day. Cyclops stopped in Barbados on March 3, 1918. She refueled and restocked supplies. The captain's report seemed routine. Some sources said the ship exceeded its loading limit, but it's not certain. The ship was known to have engine problems. One cylinder wasn't working, speed was reduced. Still, the decision was made to continue the voyage. They departed Barbados Harbor on March 4th. The radio operator sent the last message. They were heading toward Baltimore. Cyclops was never seen again. The expected arrival date in Baltimore came and went. The ship wasn't responding to calls. The Navy went on alert. The Coast Guard got involved. All coastal stations were notified. Wreckage reports were checked. There was no trace. The ship had simply evaporated. All ports along the route were questioned. No one had seen Cyclops. Maritime traffic records were examined. Nothing. It was wartime. The first thought was enemy attack. German submarines were active in the Atlantic, but German records were checked. There was no report of an attack on Cyclops. After the war, German submarine commanders were asked. None claimed to have sunk Cyclops. Sinking the ship would have been a major achievement. Hiding it made no sense. The possibility of a maritime accident was investigated. The ship was old, had engine trouble, might have been overloaded. A sudden storm could have sunk the ship without warning. But there's no record of major storms in that area on those dates. No Mayday signal was sent. No wreckage was found. No bodies from the 309 crew members were recovered. No life jackets, wooden pieces, personal belongings. Nothing washed ashore. Conspiracy theories weren't lacking either. The captain was accused of German espionage. George Worley was a German-sounding name, but no evidence was found. The possibility of mutiny was discussed. Sabotage was considered. The result was always the same. No information, no evidence, no explanation. There's one more interesting detail. Cyclops had two sister ships, Proteus and Nereus. Both disappeared in the same area in 1941, also without permission. Both were heavily loaded. Both sank without leaving any trace. 3 sister ships, 3 losses, no answers. Today, the USS Cyclops is recorded as the U.S. Navy's largest non-combat loss in history. It's at the center of Bermuda Triangle legends. But the truth might be much more mundane. An old ship, a heavy load, an unhappy crew, and perhaps a bad decision. The sea took everything. It returned nothing. 309 people disappeared silently and were never found. The year was 1925. The SS Cotopaxi was a cargo ship. She departed from Charleston, South Carolina. Destination, Havana, Cuba. Cargo, 4,400 tons of coal. 32 people were aboard. Captain W.J. Meyer was an experienced merchant sailor. The ship was small but sturdy. It was November. The sea was calm. It should have been a routine voyage. On November 29, 1925, the ship left Charleston. The first 2 days were normal. The ship was following the designated route. Weather conditions were good. The radio operator was sending regular messages. On December 1st, the last message came. The ship reported being in distress. The position was off Cuba. The weather was deteriorating. Then silence. Cotopaxi never reported again. For the first few days, no one was worried. Radio failure was a common occurrence. Maybe the ship had reached Havana and hadn't reported. But port records were checked. Cotopaxi hadn't arrived. The shipping company in South Carolina went on alert. The Coast Guard took action. The search began. Cuban coastlines were scanned. Ship wreckage was searched for. Floating materials at sea were checked. Nothing was found. Fishing boats were questioned. No one had seen Cotopaxi. Announcements were made to merchant ships. There was no trace. The ship had completely vanished. The storm possibility was strong. There had been severe weather events in the Caribbean those days. A small ship could sink in a big storm, but other ships were in that area. None mentioned a major storm. Cotopaxi's last message mentioned distress, but there was no panic. What exactly happened remained unclear. Cargo imbalance was also a possibility. It's a dangerous situation for coal ships. If the cargo shifts, the ship can suddenly capsize. The crew's response time is very short. But this theory also couldn't be proven. Without finding the wreck, no examination could be made. The families of 32 crew members waited for answers. The government launched an official investigation. The report mentioned insufficient information. The ship was recorded as lost at sea. The insurance company made payment. The file was closed. Years later, in 2020, a wreck was found off the Cuban coast. A Florida-based team claimed the ship might be Cotopaxi. The position and period matched, but definitive identification couldn't be made. The wreck was too old and damaged. The debate continues. Today, SS Cotopaxi is also among Bermuda Triangle stories. But hundreds of ships have sunk in that area. Most have very simple explanations. Storm, accident, human error. Cotopaxi was probably one of these. But there's no certain information. 32 people were lost at sea. Their families got no answers. The wreck couldn't be definitively identified, and the sea continues to keep it secret.